Greetings and welcome to Connecting with the Intent Show. I'm your host Muhammad Awais. On this episode, we have a very special guest. He is founder and CEO at Alternative Sensing and Reentry Solutions, Edward Sanders. Please join me to give a warm welcome to our guest, Edward Sanders. Edward, welcome.
And thank you. Thank you for inviting me and actually having me here on your show.
Let me start with this. Where were you? What happened? Who were you surrounded with that inspired you to do what you do today?
I always give credit to my grandmother, Helen Sanders, my father's mother. I was always inspired by her because of what little education she had and what strides she always attempted to take and try to obtain. So I would say it was my grandmother, Helen Sanders. And what was the other part of that statement?
What is your higher purpose in life?
At this age, what what I am striving to do is build a legacy. I am attempting to build a legacy, not a 9 to 5. This isn't a job. My work is a legacy building.
What have been top three greatest challenges that you have had to overcome?
One is I made serious mistakes as an adolescent in my early teens. I made critical errors, and that error or errors costed me dearly. And that was taken like all children or quite a few children, where when we get of a certain age, we kind of migrate from family to peer network. That peer connection wasn't good for me. Whether it was me as a bad influence with other peers, or whether it was other peers' bad influence with me, or whether it was a mixture. In any case, it didn't work. It was a bad migration from family network to peer network, and it led me into trouble. And that trouble were it was like it wasn't like a repetitive thing, but it was one thing, and that costed me to be convicted and sentenced to serve my natural life in prison for something that not that I done with my own hands, but something that another fellow youth had done. But I was being held accountable for it nevertheless. And I failed to take and insist on the other person taking responsibility for their actions. And I took in kind of um, leaned into a community code in the environment where unhealthy community code, which was to remain silent. And that silence took it costed me 43 and a half years of my life. And so then taking in being in that situation, I had to make a decision about my life, regardless of the circumstances that I was in. And so I made critical circumstances not to rehabilitate, because a child doesn't rehabilitate. A child habilitate. Okay, take the re off the front of that. A child habilitate. They don't rehabilitate. If I were to rehabilitate, that means I will go back to the very harm that put me in the situation. I habilitated. I learned new things, and that's what children do. They are resist. They are resilient, and so I learned resilience. So whatever early childhood experiences that I had was harmful, I took and learned from them and became resilient.
What is your greatest failure story? What did you learn and how did you recover from it?
As I mentioned, my greatest failure was taking and remaining quiet when I should have spoke up, when I wasn't at fault, when it wasn't my fault. I should have took and stood up and said more. That's not to excuse the judicial system. That's not to excuse the incompetent attorney. That's not to excuse a police acting inappropriate with evidence in the case, and information that he or she may have been aware of. But in regards to my own personal responsibility, it was the failure to take and speak up. And what I learned from that was not to do that. And what I would do different in the future is to speak up in my own interest, to always protect myself, always remember that no one is more responsible for you than you, and that you have to take and be your own advocate, no matter how young or how old you are.
What is the most impactful book you have read, and what did you learn from it?
And thank you very much for asking that question. The most impactful book that I have read in recent years would be Just Mercy. Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, who is an attorney. What I learned from that is that, in spite of the situation that you might be in terms of where you done went through some education and training to take and do something very noble, and you find yourself in a situation where you've been delegated or relegated to a mediocre situation, like in the case of Brian Stevenson. This gentleman went to school to become an attorney, and he wound up being assigned to walk his clients to death row. And he found that not to be consistent with his values. That wasn't the objective of him going to law school and learning law, only to take and walk his clients to the death row and watch them be executed, to be a witness of the state-sponsored violence. And subsequently, he became one of the best attorneys in the 20th century here in the United States, where he's responsible for taking and bringing home over 1,000 children that was once sentenced and convicted, condemned to die behind bars without the possibility of parole. And even in addition to that, making the death penalty unaccessible to children, making it unaccessible to children and making it unaccessible to people who were mentally ill, which was occurring here in the United States. Despite its high values and its more standing over other nations, the United States were executing children, and they were executing people that didn't have the mental capacity to take and determine right from wrong. A principle that we, even if we go into the early history of Islam, there is a story about this one person coming to the Prophet Muhammad and taking reporting that he had committed adultery or fornication. And the Prophet kept telling him to go away. And the person kept coming back. And after the third time, the Prophet inquired to his family and friends and others that was aware of this person and knew this person. And he inquired whether or not this person was of sound mind. And it was only after he was able to ascertain that he make a decision to take and hold that person accountable for his behavior. Well, here in the United States, even though the country may rebuke Islam as being a 14th century religion, despite all of the psychiatrists and psychologists and social workers and other mental health providers, we were doing this to people who we knew were mentally incompetent. We were still executing them. And children that we don't even give the right to take and vote, or we don't give them the right to take and drive, heavy construction vehicles, and in some cases, even a basic driver's license. We don't give them the right to take and enter into contracts, but we were executing them as a nation. So imagine that. And the United States, even to this day, have the largest number of children serving life without the possibility of parole in any nation in the world. In fact, we're probably one or two or maybe three nations in the world that even sentence children to life in prison without parole. The intent is that they die in prison.
What are your goals for the next 12 months?
This organization, Alternative Sentence and Reentry Solution, was designed with the purpose, the intent of taking and addressing the issues that I just raised to you, is to take and help bring home these children after having been condemned to die in prison without the possibility of parole. The purpose of this organization is to bring them home, to take and show merit to their humanity, to take and show that even though children may make some of the most horrendous mistakes, nevertheless, they represent within our population of other human beings the greatest potential for reform, to take and to change, to make amends to their lives. They are the most receptive to taking and being contrite. Okay, this is the nature of a child. It's the very nature of a child, and they have resilience. And the other fact is that no child is born bad. So if there's any bad tendencies there, it's part of the harm that was done to the child itself. And so my objective is within the next year is to take and promulgate this reality that there's no child born bad, and that no matter how horrendous a child's behavior is, we should always look back in on that child and see how that child is doing a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later, 10 years later, and see if that person has changed and become a person that's mendable to living in society in a good and decent way. So that's my objective. And when we bring these people home, we are not just interested in their release from prison, but to help them reintegrate back into society. You know, you don't take a child that have lived their entire adult life behind bars and just simply release them back into society. It's like the Quran say, when you release a person from slavery, you educate them and teach them good morals. The same thing have to be done with a child when a child is brought out of prison. You take and make sure that you reintegrate them back into society without the barriers of continuous trauma that put them in the situation in the first place. So within the next year, this is what I intend to do. One, to take and advocate for us to take a second look at these children that was condemned to die in prison. And three, those who prove to take and be mendable, to take and give them a second chance. And then upon giving them a second chance, to help them reintegrate back into society.
What advice you will give to younger yourself?
Remember that you have a nature that is similar to clay. It's easily molded, easily molded. You can take and change the configuration of it. So you have to be careful of who and what you associate yourself with. Try to always associate yourself with, no matter how tempting and appealing things may be, always associate yourself with what you know in your nature to be better, to be better. Even if you're doing mischievous things, always strive to try to do what is right. And that will become part of your nature. It will become natural for you to take and make good decisions, to take and act well. And those things will prove to take you farther than making bad decisions. Than making bad decisions. Remember, anyone can make a decision, but what is meritable is making good decisions, making right decisions. They like a fruit or a seed in a fruit. They sprout up. They sprout up. And you know there are trees in your yard that may have been planted before you were born. But those trees only look as good as they do, and they are only as strong as they are, and they have those good sweet fruits and things on them as they are, is because they were planted right. And the same thing is going to happen with you. If you find weeds in a yard, you know that that's a bad cultivation. And it's the same thing with you. Allow yourself to be cultivated right. You know what is right. You know what is wrong. It's in your nature. It's in your nature. Follow your nature. Sometimes the majority in our society, the adults in our society, may not do the right thing. That's the present thing. That's the present situation right here in the United States. We have peoples in politics, that's supposed to be our world leaders. These are the people that are shaping our social fabric, our economic fabric, our educational fabric. They are not necessarily doing the right thing. You already know that. You already know that. You already know that a person that's holding a high position in society shouldn't be acting a certain way. That we shouldn't be using our military might or our financial might to take and cause harm to other people in other parts of the world. You already know that. You already know that. Act up on what you know. Even when you see adults not doing the right thing, try to take and act up on what your nature tells you, what your inner self tells you, what is right and wrong.
How can we support you?
That's an excellent question. And that's the most important one after you become aware of some of the important work that I'm doing. You can support me, one, by resources. You may have some skill set, maybe volunteer with my web page. I mean, not the ones that's pretending to take and want to volunteer and do something, and after they get you anxious or excited about something, they tell you about a payment plan when it started off as an offer to take and try to do some good. We're talking about real service, not somebody that have a gimmick that's going on. Those get in the way of the work that we're trying to do. This is a nonprofit organization. If you have some skill sets, offer those skill sets. If you have some wealth, if you can take and contribute, we have a button on our web page where a person can go and make a financial contribution. If you want to sponsor a program we have, you can sponsor a program. For example, we have a program where we use formerly incarcerated individuals to take and act as mentors to youth or children and young adults that are at risk, high risk youth and younger adults. Okay, you can sponsor that and say, hey, I would take and give a stipend to a former returning citizen for him or her to spend time with a troubled youth. Okay, or with children that may not be in trouble, but you want to keep them out of trouble. And you say, hey, I want to sponsor that. Or you can take and say that you want to sponsor a luncheon where returning citizens are taken out to a lunch, or at least once a month. They're taken out to a luncheon, and the purpose of that is to introduce them back into society, to expose them to community resources and leaders and representatives in the community that have things within their organization that they might be able to make use of. Like I'm a member, I'm an entrepreneur at a community college. I took and went out as an entrepreneur in residence. Even though I'm an entrepreneur in residence, I went out. We started a new category for returning citizens to pitch their business idea. So we helped them with their business plan, etc. We helped them with their web page and other things, and they got their business started. And we turned around one of the first contestants that we got to pitch their idea. This young lady won she won $3,000. She won $3,000. That's a lot of money towards her small business. And this is a returning citizen. And she's a former child that had been sent to prison to serve her entire life in prison. She's home in the community and trying to start her own business. Her participation awarded her $3,000 towards her small business. On the other hand, we are also taking and trying to educate former juvenile lifers without parole to work alongside attorneys that are representing children in adult courts, where the children that have previously been in that situation can share their lived experiences with attorneys, helping them be more informed about the unique culture of that situation. What it's like for a child to go through an adult judicial system, what it's like for a child to go to live in an adult prison environment, to be 14, 15, or 16 years old in a maximum security prison with big men or women that's much older than you. What it means for you to live with them on a daily basis and to grow up and literally see the whole prison environment change over, and you still there. You've been there for 10 years, for 20 years, for 30 years, and you literally watch the whole prison environment change over. You watch all the programs change over. You watch staff come in and retire, and that's how you live your entire life. And the system tell you that no programs is available for you to rehabilitate you, that because you are intended to die. So there's no reason to put any resources in you. So we help attorneys. We try to equip these people who have previously been in that situation how to take and transmit that knowledge, that information to defense attorneys that now have to argue these cases before the court. When the prosecutor then take and try to pretend that they don't know the horrific inhumanity, inhuman conditions that they subjected them to. They try to tell the court they done nothing to better themselves when they was there, when they know darn well the policies that they supported said that these children couldn't do anything other than be warehoused in adult prisons. No rehabilitative programs were ever intended for them. Okay, they was never intended for them. Okay, these people, these are sentences that children are always innocent of this type of punishment. We are not saying that they're innocent of the acts that may have got them there, but they're innocent of that kind of punishment. We all know that there's a different type of reprimand you give adult than the one that you give to a child. And if we were in the community and we seen a fellow adult chastising a child inappropriately, the rest of us responsible adults would intervene. And that's what I'm saying. That's the service. That's the help you can give me. Here in the United States, we inappropriately chastise children. And no matter where you at in the world, whether you in India, China, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, the Sudans, no matter where you are, intervene in this. Intervene in this. Speak up and say, hey, you are not treating your children well. And tell them you know because I told you so. And I am a former juvenile lifer without parole. I've served 43 years, 43 and a half years in prison. I've come home and got a master's degree at the leading school of social work in the nation. And I did that not to go out and get a job as a social worker, but to create a legacy, to start some work and do something different. Okay, so if there's any one person that I'm inspired about beyond my grandmother, it will be Muhammad Ali. Okay, we're going to do something different. We're going to face the odds and we're going to come out this victorious. And thank you.
What would you say about your guest appearance on this show?
I appreciate being here. I appreciate the questions that have been asked. I appreciate the opportunity to say, what can we do for you? Because quite often I find others in the community that ask things of you, and you provide those things. And when you pick up the phone or send word that you need some help, it's like a one-way communication. It's like what you can do for me, not what I can do for you. Doing for each other should be reciprocal. You know, doing good should be reciprocal. I came home from prison after serving 43 and a half years. I had plenty needs. So I had one hand out. Asking for things, but I made it my business to have my other hand out providing some type of service. Okay. Every Sunday, I used to go downtown in Detroit, in the city of Detroit. They have an area that's well known for drug addicts and homeless people, people that might have other kind of addictions. And I joined it with another group. They had the food. All they needed was other people to come and help them pass the food out. I made it my business to be there. When I got ready to go off to grad school, I took and called someone and said, hey, I'm finna go to grad school, and I done made a commitment to be here every Sunday at noon to help feed people. Would you stand in my absence while I'm going to grad school? Okay, so before I went off to grad school, I made sure that somebody was in my place helping this organization or group of men and women. And they were all different positionalities. I met with people that I would have ordinarily not chose to be with, but we were all doing some good. It didn't matter that the other person was gay. It didn't matter that the other person was a male or a female. It didn't matter that the other person was fat or the other person was short or tall. we were all there for a common good, and I made sure that I was there to do that. When I was in school, I had one foot in school and I had one foot out in the community doing good. I would go to the mosque and pray, and I would take and be in tears, but I would, just like I would ask Allah for something, I would go out in the community and do something. I would go out and do something. You are never handicapped, no matter how high your needs are. No matter how high your needs are. When I first came home, the question was about marriage, and I say no. I have too many needs to take and then go into a relationship and burden somebody with all these needs I had. So I was like, I had to resolve some of the needs that I got before I can go into a union with someone. Okay. So my focus was just getting myself together and not burden someone else. Okay. But we all have the ability. We understand, like most of the world understand what sadaqah and zakat is. One means only the people that have the wealth can give the zakat. Okay, they give that tax. But the poor person, they can give, or people that may not be so wealthy, they may be able to take and do both. They may be able to take and give a little bit of tax or no tax at all, but they can always give charity. They can always give good deeds. That comes from a good heart, come from righteousness. You know, it comes from righteousness. It can be a simple thing as just simply having a smile on your face and greeting other people when they greet you to greet them back. You know, that's something that we all can do. It doesn't take much from that, you know. And thank you. So this experience to be here to say, what can we do for you, as you know, as well as taking and saying, hey, what can you, advice you can give someone, okay? Young people should take and make good decisions. Take and practice on making good decisions. Even if you made a bad one yesterday, say that was a test. So just say, okay, I'm start off fresh after that bad decision, and then start over, and then measure yourself and see, you know, how you doing that. You know, how well you coming with that.
What closing thoughts would you like to share with our listeners?
There was a when I was in prison, there was this imam, and I would go to his office to spend some time with him, and I would always catch him writing in his book before we got a chance to talk, and it was always important to him, and he would hold me up just while he do this, and he was never rude to taking, you know, to have an appointment with someone and not tend to them. And so one day I asked, "What is you writing in there? What, you know, what's so important there? You do this religiously. What is you doing?" And he's saying that I keep a record of my good and my bad deeds. Well, he said, I keep a record of my good deeds in here, or all my deeds, and I go back and check them to make, to keep account of what I'm doing that Allah ordered me to do, and what I'm doing that I wasn't told by Allah to do. And I said, really? You keep a record of that? And he said, yes. You know, and it became apparent to me, you know, in the passage of the Quran, it tells us that this is what the angels do. So the angels keep, and he was like, well, why wouldn't you do it? They taking and keeping a record of you. Why wouldn't you do it? And I was like, that was very eye-opening for me, that this grown man, he got what he said was his ideal job. He get a chance to come in to people who were in prison, and he can go over to the prison hospital, and he can go over to the segregation unit, or the hole where they put prisoners when they reportedly misbehave, and he can go in all of these oppressed environments, and he felt that that was his life, ideal life situation and rewards. But here he was taking and keeping account of things that, his own behavior, and I found that very refreshing. What you and I had talked about earlier about the difference between learning from our mistakes versus taking and always looking to our good deeds, because one view is a self-righteous one. It would condition you to become self-righteous, where the other one would cause you to show some humility, When you're looking at your mistakes all the time, it allows you to have some humility. When you're looking at everything that you do right all the time, it causes you to become self-righteous and judgmental. It's no mistake that the Quran starts off with Bismillah, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So one of those mercies is exclusive. I mean, it's inclusive of everyone, everything in the creation that's been created, irregardless of the merit that it may have to need this mercy or to earn this mercy. Everyone is included, so it's an inclusive mercy, Rahman. Only Rahim is exclusive. Only Rahim is exclusive. And we tend to take and act as human beings as though we hold Rahim, that we the ones to say who is included in this mercy. And we have excluded practically the rest of humanity, but for a few of us. There's a few of us claiming to be so darn righteous that we have the attitude to say that irregardless of all of the believers before us, our belief is so right that they all condemn to hell. We say that even about people who are our forerunners, who are our ancestors. We say that about them. That's a heck of a belief. When you can take and say that all of the righteous parents, fathers and mothers, all of the social builders that came before us, all of them are condemned to hell, and we think that we're the only ones that are blessed. You are misunderstanding Rahim, and you're definitely misunderstanding Rahman. It's inclusive. God's mercy is inclusive of everything that God has brought into this universe, including the worm that is molding its way through the earth. There's a mercy for it. There's something under the earth, under that dark, hot earth, for that worm. It's there, no matter how dark. You got fish that's in the sea. They're so far down, there's no light penetrate, and God has put a light on their head. They like the man in the cave, and he got a light on his head while he make his way through the cave. Well, you only emulating what your creator done already did with that fish that's down in the far, far, far deep sea. That made it where that fish can see too. So it got a light on the top of his head, and you be like, who put that on that fish?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Edward, for sharing your wisdom with us today on the behalf of Connecting with Intent community and our entire team. We really appreciate you. This is Muhammad West. Until the next episode, all good wishes.